Hello everybody and welcome to another short Dwarf Fortress tutorial. In this video we're going to be talking about hospitals and the importance of hospitals and why you should build a hospital and why it is important to build a hospital. Well, first and foremost, dwarves get hurt, and this means that you're going to need to care for your injuries. So in Dwarf Fortress, what dwarves do is they will bring dwarves to the hospital and tend to their wounds. This means a few things need to be set up, and you also need a room for it and dedicated to it. So before we do anything else, we're going to begin digging out our space for a hospital. This right here is my central staircase, which leads up to the surface and the entrance of my fort. I kind of like to have my hospitals somewhere close by to everything that are easily accessible. This is my guest bedroom for dwarves staying in, or humans, or anybody else who comes by the fortress who's staying in this tavern to hang out in and rest in, so might as well have a connection to that as well. It doesn't need to be a particularly large space, it just needs to be big enough so that you can fit basically 10 dwarves is what I say usually, because a squad is up to 10 dwarves, so you might as well have a hospital that's big enough to fit the majority of your military, which seems intelligent. Now, just like any self-respecting dwarf, we're going to begin smoothing the area around our hospital and just kind of begin beautifying it up a little bit. We're going to fill these two up with doors and this one up here with a door. Now, if you look over at my stockpile, we have a few items in here already. We have several beds, and we have these coffers, which are rock chests. Chests can be made of wood or metal, and coffers can be made of stone. And I think boxes are made of glass, but any of those will work. Even a bag will work. There's some fighting happening in the basement. Looks like the war against the troglodytes is continuing. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be placing beds, we're going to be placing coffers, and we are going to be placing a table, and the last thing that we're going to be placing is a traction bench. Now, a traction bench is a little bit tricky. It requires a few specific materials. It requires a constructed table, which can be made at a carpenter's shop or a stoneworker's shop, and it requires a mechanism, which can be made at the mechanic's shop, which is down here, and it requires a rope, which can be made at the clother's shop with cloth right here. So, once you have all of those materials, we are going to make ourselves a traction bench. So we're going to open up the manager's screen over here, and we are going to assign a traction bench. Or we can go down here, and we can queue it up at the mechanic's shop, which is what I'm going to do manually for this video. So we're just going to do this now so that they complete the task immediately, and then go back to watching them smooth and polish up our little hospital zone here. And once the traction bench is complete and the order has been assigned, and the dwarf who is building our traction bench right here, Rimtar, has completed the traction bench, we will continue the video. Now the dwarf is finishing up the traction bench right here, so what we're going to do is we're going to just make sure that they continue mining. And they seem to have stopped as if they found jobs that were more important. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the priority amount on digging out this hospital. Alright, so now as the smoothing gets done, we can start placing furniture. So the first thing we're going to place is that traction bench that we constructed earlier, which is for setting your back and making sure that your body is still functional after a major injury. We do have one shale traction bench, which was made out of a shale table. In fact, it looks like we made several. So what we're going to do now that we have that traction bench is we are going to throw down some beds. We're going to go back to furniture, and we're going to go. And once again, remember to click Keep Building after placement so you don't need to place multiple at a time. And because we don't care about materials, we'll just place down 6 beds. We'll do 3 more. I'm only placing them where the floors have been smoothed until we run out of beds. That'll do just fine. And then in those last spots there, we're going to place a chest and a table. Now, the table is important because the dwarves will put injured dwarves on the table, and I think they apply casts on tables. I've seen them do it enough that I'm like, well, we need to put tables in there. And then the chest is where they store thread and cloth, which are used as both bandages and for stitching up wounds, as well as crutches and splints. Now, crutches and splints are brought with in the default embark, and if you need more, they can be queued up quite easily from the manager's screen. That being said, if you do not want to use the manager's screen, it's also very easy to just queue up a whole bunch at your carpenter's shop for both crutches and splints. They can also be made in the metalworker's shop and in other locations out of different materials, but I usually just make them out of wood, at least initially, because you generally have quite a lot at the start, and they're not too difficult to keep in large quantities. Now that almost everything is placed, we're just going to simply place that table that I mentioned earlier, which we're going to plop down right there. And now that all of this is done, we're going to make this into a zone. So we are going to select a meeting zone, because that's what this is. And then we're going to click and drag and fill up this entire zone, right? So now that this zone is full, we can accept it. And we are going to assign a new existing location to this zone. And the location we are going to add is a hospital. Now that we've made this into a hospital, it's now officially a hospital. You can see this little hospital icon up there. We can click on this little we can click on the little magnifying sign. Now it's going to ask us to assign a chief medical dwarf so that the hospital functions properly, which means we're going to pause the game. I'm going to close all of these notifications and these petitions and everything. I'm going to open up this screen, and we're going to select a chief medical dwarf. Now this is the nobles screen. Now the nobles screen is selected with the hotkey N, and we need to assign a chief medical dwarf so that the hospital functions. So we're going to simply click on a dwarf that I was going to say has skills in doctoring, but instead we'll just simply pick somebody who's probably handled a body before. So fish cleaner, congratulations. You've just received a massive increase in your responsibilities. So Ast, our fish cleaner, is now our chief medical dwarf and is going to be doing all of the hospital-related jobs. So now that that is completed, we're going to open up this hospital zone once again, and we are going to click on the expanded options. So it's going to tell us what they're going to store in here. So in order to have a fully functional hospital, you're going to need thread, you're going to need cloth, you're going to need splints, and you're going to need crutches. Now, buckets are important as hell for keeping dwarves alive, so you want to have buckets as well, and then everything else at this point is optional. So now, as you can see down here, there's a list of other options you can give. These are specializations and are not necessary. Ast, the chief medical dwarf, will go around just doing all of these tasks, but if you want to have very specific dwarves for certain tasks, such as diagnosing, surgery, and bone setting, this allows you to specifically set those tasks. You only need the chief medical dwarf, though. Once again, as always, do you want to doctor people that are part of your fortress or not, or do you want it to be just your dwarves only? We're going to say citizens and long-term residents only here. Soap is optional, but very useful for preventing infection. Buckets is necessary for keeping dwarves alive. Powder for casks is optional, but ideal if you want to have your bones setting correctly. Crutches are very important and required for dwarves who can't walk. Splints are very important, and I recommend making a bunch of crutches and splints and storing probably close to 10 of them in your hospitals at a time. Those can be made at the carpenter's workshop, as mentioned earlier in the video. Cloth is important, and you start with a bunch. And as long as you have looms set up and access to spider webs, you shouldn't have any problem getting more cloth. And thread comes from the farmer's workshop with various different materials, such as spinning it off of your livestock or just from spider webs. And all of these should naturally fill themselves up. The only one that you'll need to do yourself are powder for casks and soap, but those two are optional. Thank you very much for watching this very basic video on hospitals. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down beneath this video, and I'll do my best to help. And if you would like to see other things that I do, you can go over to twitch.tv/BLINDIRL to see my face while I play video games on the internet. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.